Just in the way of background, I thought I'd just share a little bit about what we do at ActiFi. There are really three things. One, we have the privilege to partner with the FPA on doing the industry's most in-depth research on advisor technology and productivity. We're in the midst of doing a 450-dimensional study of 16 different CRM vendors side by side, and we'll be releasing that in February. That's an area that we're really excited about. We're going across CRM, financial planning, portfolio management, document management, rebalancing, compliance, report generation, all those sorts of things. Number two is we are practice management consultants. We camp out in advisory practices and help them work on their business. So I personally probably spend about 20 to 30% of my time on the ground at the 1 foot level with advisors and their staffs, helping them actually execute on the strategies that they've said they were going to do. And then lastly is we translate all that experience to help firms like yours build your own practice management capabilities. So just in the way of background, and those three things are very complementary in terms of the research, actually doing it, and then working with institutions so they can build their own internal capabilities. So enough about me. What I'm going to do here today is tell a little story. So in the context of this story, the you in the story is going to be assuming that you are someone who leads a group of people who are in charge of helping advisors build better businesses. And that could be via financial planning, it could be via marketing, it could be via growth. And the second part of it is I'm going to use the term coach as I discuss this story. Coach really means anyone whose role it is to help advisors build better businesses. So that could be a branch manager, that could be a practice management consultant, that could be an internal wholesaler, really anyone whose job it is to help that advisor. So in the case of the story, you are sitting at your desk on a nice Tuesday afternoon, getting prepared for a presentation that you're going to give to the CEO and executive committee on the results of your 2009 activities and really laying out the 2010 plan as to how you're going to go forward. So you're sitting down at your desk, you've asked your finance people to kind of prepare all of the statistics from the last year in terms of productivity, and you're kind of thinking through how are you going to tackle this issue. And so as you do that, you just start by looking at, well, what have we done? So we want to start by understanding what impact have we had on advisors that we've coached, that we've worked with. Well, in this case, we can see we've had pretty significant impact on the advisors, ranging in terms of, as measured by annualized revenue growth, we've grown these practices in between 17 and 35% a year. Pretty good starting point. Something we want to definitely use in our presentation. We want to match that against the overall firm productivity. We've had a record year in recruiting as a firm. However, our same-store sales, or the existing advisors that we have, the overall productivity of the firm has dropped. So the revenue revenue growth and that's been generated by our existing advisors is actually negative. So we've got a little gap there. Next, we want to kind of look at the scalability. How have we done? We started our practice management capability in 2006. We've gradually ramped that up over the last couple of years. We've gone from 0 to 200 advisors that we're working with, so we're pretty proud of the progress that we've made. However, as we look at that in comparison to the total number of advisors, our friends in recruiting have done an equally good job, and our overall advisor base has grown. So we look at that gap, and it's pretty significant. The gap between the advisors that we're working with actively to helping them, on a proactive basis build better businesses to our overall advisor base. So kind of look at that gap, and we begin to think about, gee, we're producing some great results, but we're really not impacting enough advisors. So what would happen if we could triple, quadruple, quintuple the number of advisors that we work with? Well, the big issue is scalability. We know it works. We know the things that we have and that we've done work. We've got results. Advisors have told us that it works, but we haven't really figured out how to scale that. So the first thing that kind of comes to mind is, well, why don't we just hire more coaches? Why don't we add headcount and begin to attract super experienced people that have all the knowledge and skills required to really help our advisors grow? Well, a couple of problems with that. Number one is finding those people isn't necessarily very easy. And number two, kind of coming into the executive team meeting with a proposal to triple our headcount from a budgetary standpoint is maybe not a position that we want to take. So we're kind of thinking about that and saying, how are we going to tackle that problem? Well, before we start to work on our PowerPoint, we say, well, why don't we just review what has worked for us over the last year and the last couple of years? So what's definitely working today? First, when we get experienced people who really have the knowledge and wisdom internally to help our advisors, they produce great results, no doubt about it. Number two is we've got the goods. The content, we have great programs for segmentation, we have marketing programs, we have all these fantastic programs. You go out to our internet and we have 552 pages of all sorts of great stuff. Using it's a whole different story, and that's kind of what we're going to dovetail on today from what Julie was talking about, which is the execution part. Thirdly, when we follow up and create accountability, that works really well. And lastly, having visibility towards goals, again, exactly what we ask our advisors to do via the planning process with their clients. Do we take our own advice? Do we do that with our advisors? Do we actually understand what are their goals and how are they tracking against their goals? If that's what we're trying to coach the advisors to do with their end clients, how are we doing as executives in the firm? So we contemplate this and really realize we've got the foundation for something big here. The challenges are what aren't working. So we're going to talk about this for a minute. First off, just capacity. Our folks are working hard. We can't just, given the current process and the current infrastructure that we have, we can't ask them to triple the number of coaches. They're pretty maxed out because what it takes to do the coaching is significant. Number two, we also can't expect that if we hire someone that their first day on the job, they're going to understand every best practice we have at the firm, exactly how to apply that to the specific goals of advisors. I mean, we just cannot expect that, and it doesn't work. When we have expected that, we've been pretty disappointed. Thirdly, consistency. When we look at how various people coach advisors, there's just a very wide range of experiences, from really world-class to a lot less so. And in terms of the deliverables, we really don't have a clue what's actually going out there to advisors and how they're producing that. So that's a big challenge. It's also something we're a little bit nervous about. Number four, while we can track at the very highest level revenue growth, there's a lot of other important business goals that advisors have that have nothing to do with revenue growth. It might be around succession. They might want to golf more. It might be around time. It might be around deepening relationships. There's all sorts of goals. So we don't have really a good method of mapping the actual indicator that the advisor's focused on. And if that's not growth, well, what is it? And how do we map that? So that's an important challenge we haven't figured that out. Next, again, the process as we have it today is very time and labor intensive. So it takes us as long to work with a small practice as it does with a large practice. And with limited resources, we've got to begin to prioritize. And in fact, a lot of our smaller practices need it more. That's a big challenge. Next, what Julie talked about in terms of client feedback is so impactful. And we know this stuff. What we don't know is how effectively our advisors are using it. What have they actually executed this week to implement the recommendations that have been generated? We have no way of tracking that. Next, obviously we've got the 1% advisors that are incredibly motivated and have the skill sets to kind of self-manage, but as a basic expectation that advisors are going to flawlessly execute and track on their own, we know that's simply not true. It works with a few, but the assumption we need to make is that if we're going to be an effective organization and we're going to drive consistent organic growth within our firm, we've got to take some accountability for that. We can't leave it all up to the advisor. Next, practice management always starts with a strong enough why. If that advisory practice isn't motivated, if the why isn't compelling enough, just because we think it's a good idea or we want them to do it, there's little correlation to their execution. So we need to make sure that the goals that we're helping that advisor achieve are personally meaningful to them. And we know that because they tell us, this is what matters most to me, this is what I'm committed to doing, and I may or may not care what you want me to do, but I am telling you this is what I want to do, and this is what I'm really going to do. I'm committed. And then lastly, just matching our internal resources. We have a real supply-demand problem in our firm. We've spent a lot of money on different programs. We've got marketing programs, we've got training programs, we've got great content. What we can't really say with any precision is exactly how does demand meet supply, and how do we optimize our internal resource allocation in terms of making sure that the programs and resources and investments that we've made really are getting out to the people who want to use them and need them most. So these are some of the challenges. So now as we kind of stare at our PowerPoint slide, we're kind of thinking, you know, what got us from the beginning to the point we are at right now is not going to get us from the point we're at now to where we want to go in the future. So we kind of begin to think, you know what, a new approach is required. So we're going to take a blank piece of paper, we kind of pull out our sketch pad, and people don't realize, especially the CEO, that we actually used to be an amateur cartoonist. So we're going to start by drawing a picture, and we're going to really begin with the end in mind. What would the perfect scalable practice management organization look like? Well, it's the drawing that you have in front of you. So I'm actually not an amateur cartoonist. The good news is I do have one on staff. So if you pull that out, I'll just kind of explain this diagram of what we drew. So we put our PowerPoint slide, a PowerPoint and computer aside. We've got our sketch pad. And really what you're going to see here are a couple things. I'll just walk you through it quickly. Here we have you as the financial institution. You have hundreds or thousands of practices. So all of these are your practices. Here's a blow-up view of a single practice. And then down here, we've got our little cartoon characters. The orange guys are the advisory practice. That represents all the people in the practice. And the blue folks are the coaches. So again, some definitions. So let me walk you through this a little bit. So as you're kind of beginning to think about, well, where do I start? If I'm going to build scalable practice management, it really starts with the why. Or it starts with the definition of what is practice management. And one of the things we're going to do later, and I know Bill is going to make this a piece of cake, is what is financial planning? Well, I've taken a crack at what is practice management. I'm just going to read this definition for a minute. It is a set of optimized services and solutions that enable advisors to achieve their most important business objectives. And again, those business objectives can be wide-ranging, from I want to engage more clients in an ongoing financial planning relationship to I want to create value for my firm so when I retire, I can monetize that value and I can transfer this practice to a group of people that I have confidence in will take it to the next level. It could be I want to create more time. I want to spend more time with my family. I'm tired of being in the office every Saturday for 8 hours. It doesn't matter what the objectives are. The important thing is they're extremely important to the advisor. So this is the operating definition that we've come up with as to what practice management really is. So how do we do it? Well, the starting point, as I was talking about earlier, is the why. So the one group, and Julie talked a little bit about this, that the advisors will listen to carefully are the people that are responsible for 100% of their revenue. They know 100% of their paycheck is dependent on their clients. So let's try to understand what they're telling us. So that's where we have our clients here providing some feedback. The other is just the advisor's own personal motivations. And really understanding for each and every advisory practice in your firm exactly what their top 3 priorities are. Not some survey, but individually understanding what are their top goals and what are they committed to. So that's the starting point. If we have a strong enough why, then we can move to the next stage. So as we're thinking about that, next we've got to come up with some goals. And I don't know if you've heard the SMART acronym, but we want these goals to be SMART. That's specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time specific. The other thing that we want to make sure in a scalable practice management organization, if it's my first day on the job and I understand the goals, I am going to have instant access to the collective wisdom of the entire firm. So if I've got a practice management coach that's been with the firm for 20 years and has done 1,000 different engagements and really understands the full capabilities of the firm, I want the person it's their very first day on the job and has absolutely no clue as to our overall capabilities to be able to deliver the exact same recommendations to every advisor every time. And that's where we begin to institutionalize by mapping the goals to our knowledge base. And in doing that, now we're going to be able to take those from high-level goals down into the specific strategies, tactics, and tasks that will enable them to be executed. You cannot execute a recommendation. You can only execute at the task level. And this is where a lot of things fall apart. There's a couple, in each of these areas, there's some real challenges. So in this case, we're going to be very disciplined about breaking those goals down into the actionable tasks. And as we do that, we're also going to really begin to understand who's going to do those tasks, who's going to perform the tasks. And we're not just going to assign them to Susie or to John because they happen to be the only people in the room. We're going to be thoughtful in terms of their readiness to complete the task. So as we've broken our goals down, we're going to ask the person who's tasked, do you have the will? Is this something that you want to do? Is this a task that you want to do? Do you have the skill? Is this a task that you've done before? And do you have the time? Can you schedule it next Friday from 2 to 3? If the answer is no, we are not going to assign that task to that person. And that's where, as a firm, you have the opportunity to tap into the collective resources and wisdom in using some of the outside resources. And these outside resources can be your coaches, they can be other people in the firm, they can be content on your intranet, they can be outside consultants that you bring in. But what we're going to do is we're going to be very confident as we're building our scalable practice management group that when we assign a task, that we know the person that that's assigned to has the readiness level, the will, the skill, and the time to complete it. So from there, and that's where a lot of opportunity exists, because assuming that advisors automatically have the readiness for any task that you throw at them is a poor assumption. So as you begin to look at that, well, here I'll back up for a minute. As you look at that, you begin to measure, is it done, is it not done? So we've got our little coach here taking each of these tasks, marking them completed. The completed tasks are then going to link to some specific metrics. So as we've mapped these goals, we've also created associated metrics that may have, again, nothing to do with revenue growth. It might be about referrals, it might be about increasing more time, it might be about client profitability, whatever those metrics are. And we're going to actually measure and be able to show demonstrably to both ourselves as a firm and our advisors the effectiveness of these various programs. So as we look at if it's working, next we're going to measure, do we want to modify the strategy? Do we want to continue the strategy? Do we want to try something different? And then we can also pull in benchmarks. So we've got our little benchmarking tube down here where maybe we've had a lot of success, but how is our success compared to people just like us in the firm? So we begin to institutionalize some knowledge about what practices, what strategies are most correlated with various types of business results. Because we need to know that. We can't just assume people will figure that out. We've got to be systematic in our approach in tackling this issue. And this gets to our little pipes here. So this is a very important interaction which I almost never see institutionalized in the firm, is the ability to take those results, not just at the macro metric level, but really at the goal level and the strategy level, and be able to pipe those into our overall knowledge base and be able to map different results so we can create much more creative benchmarks beyond the traditional revenue models. So this is kind of what we drew, and we said, if we could create that, it'd be awesome. In addition, what we wanted to do is come up with a set of principles that we could get everyone to buy into across our firm that would really help us be successful. So the first principle we said is we're not going to try to shove stuff down advisors' throats that they don't care about. So we're going to start with, is there a strong enough why? Number two, we know we're not just going to throw these broad recommendations. Gee, you should segment your clients. Gee, you should do a profitability analysis. Yeah, I should. I have no idea how to do one, but we're going to break it down into bite-sized tasks and make it executable. And we're going to create accountability around that, which is, and the principle 3 is we're not going to do this for one advisor where we've got one coach that produces great results, and when he walks out the door or retires, all that knowledge vaporizes. We need to, from a shareholder standpoint and from a sustainability standpoint, be able to take that wisdom and embed it in the DNA of the firm. So it's not just the one person who's really good at that, it's our whole firm. And we can perpetuate that wisdom, create competitive advantage for our firm. So it's our wisdom, and that's a huge differentiator against other firms when you really can prove that you understand what makes these practices work well. Principle number 4 is, again, the results come from the activity. We're going to help you focus on the things you can control. You can't always control the end outcome, but you can control your activity. So we're going to create habits within our advisors that they want to create that will drive continual advice. So it's not just a one-time thing. We're going to, just like we're institutionalizing the wisdom in our firm, we're going to institutionalize these best practices in each and every individual advisor or advisory practice that we work with. Principle 5 is we do need to keep score. We need to link the strategy to the results, and that's going to create that momentum, the validation. Hey, what I'm doing really is working. I'm able to move the bar. I'm excited. Advisors in general are competitive folks, so we want to set up situations where they can compete against themselves in terms of their own plans, and then also against other benchmarks or advisors that they wish to compete with in terms of producing results. And then lastly, the best way to build momentum is just to be successful. It's not really hard. If you get great results, advisors are growing, they're going to tell other advisors that aren't at your firm that if you come over here, this is a place where they don't just throw out all the content at the intranet on the intranet like everyone else does. They really help you apply it specifically to your individual situation, and more importantly, they hold you accountable. They help you execute on that. And here's the proof. I mean, my practice was growing at 10% a year, 10%, 10%. We've been growing at 25% if that's the goal. Or, I used to work 50 hours a week and pull down 120,000 a year. Now I'm working 30 hours a week and making 150,000. Whatever it might be, they're going to be your best salespeople. Okay, so what have we done? What we've really done here is laid out a blueprint that we can use in our 2010 plan. How are we going to move forward? How are we going to scale our practice management capability? So next what I'm going to do is actually show you what this could look like. Again, as practice management consultants ourselves, we had to solve this problem for ourselves. So we started with, well, what do we need to build a scalable business? Because what I didn't want to do is just be a coach and be completely dependent on the skill sets of an individual resource where we've got this one great resource, we know this person has the knowledge and the capability to work with these 30 advisors, and then hopefully I can find somebody like him. I mean, that's just not a very scalable business model. It can certainly work for a time, and you can get some great results, but you can't scale it. So let's just imagine we actually surveyed our clients and asked them what they thought. So we leveraged the work that Julie's done. We pull up our advisor impact, and in this case I'm the advisor, so you can see here I had 350 households, and I've got a bunch of surveys. What did they say? Well, on one of the questions, which I'm personally is very important to me as an advisor, is increasing my referrals. I'm not out to cold call. I really want to execute on this whole referral strategy. So what did I learn? Well, I learned that 93% of my clients are likely to provide referrals, and I've got some specific actionable things that I might be able to do. So as I click on those, as I click on these results, I launch kind of seamlessly integrated my roadmap. And what is roadmap? Roadmap really, the best analogy, given that we've got a bunch of financial planners, is the tools that your clients use, a la whether it's a SunGuard or whether it's an EISI or MoneyGuide Pro, the tools they use to do this for their clients, this is the tooling to allow you to do this for advisors. Okay? So that's what this is. So what I have now are some of the opportunities. So I've got some data. 93% of my respondents are likely to provide referrals, and that specifically translates into 88 individual clients. So I'm going to put some actionable plans together for those 88 individual clients. So I said, okay, let's add this to my current opportunities. I click on that. From there, I get some different focus areas because in this case, client referral activity is what I'm going to focus on. There's also other types of referral activity that I could zero in on. I could talk about centers of influence, building my professional network, different strategies. In this case, I'm going to click on the referral activity. I click on that, and it brings up a preview of the roadmap. So in this case, what I'm able to see is, okay, well, what are some of the recommendations that we're talking about? Yep, those make sense. Let's do that. So I click on create the roadmap. From there, I get to the SMART goal. So back to, increase referrals doesn't really mean that much. I want to make that SMART. Remember our acronym specific. So what are we going to do? We're going to increase referrals from existing clients. Pretty specific. Measurable. How many clients are we talking about? We're going to do 50 referrals. We figure we've got 88 clients interested. We should be able to generate 50 referrals from that. Actionable. We're going to see that in a minute. Realistic. Yeah, that's a pretty realistic number. 88 clients, 50 referrals, pretty realistic. And time bound. By May 31st, 2010, we're going to make this happen. So I click next. And what I'm going to do here for a moment is show you the knowledge base. Remember how we said if it's my first day on the job and advisor tells me, hey, I want to increase referrals. How am I going to know all of the collective wisdom? Let's say we have 20 people that have been doing this for 10 years. What are the strategies that they use? And we wanted to build this, and we spent a lot of time and energy, build this knowledge base in a way that requires no programmers. I don't want to go to my IT department and send out a request and wait 6 months. What I want to be able to do is, I have an engagement that just finished last week, and I'm doing a one-on-one with one of my coaches, and he says, listen, here's a great strategy. It wasn't in the recommendations. We found this and it worked. Great. We're going to embed that. So we're going to have our own process internally to vet all the best practices, and we're going to reward and recognize our employees for building the collective wisdom of the firm. And here's the mechanism we have to be able to track that. So we can map very specifically each recommendation to a specific benchmark, to a specific goal, and a specific objective. Again, as an advisor, I don't really care about all the wonderful capabilities that your firm has. I care about the three things relative to the one goal I have in this case, which is increasing referrals, that you're going to enable me to do that I'm actually going to use. The 97% that I'm not going to use, I don't care about. Unfortunately, at this point in time, without some sort of system, it's very hard to figure out which 3% is absolutely relevant to me today. And the challenge is different 3% for every advisor. So that's what this is really all about, is how do you institutionalize that knowledge and wisdom in a scalable way. Now we're going to flip back to the advisor view. So in this case, I've got the 4 best practices. Here are the recommendations, and I can walk through either as the coach or the advisor on their own, each individual recommendation. What recommendation? So I may pick 1, I may pick 2, or I may pick all 4. But I'm going to vet it based on my internal willingness, the skill I have in my practice, and the time that I can dedicate to this particular goal. So again, I'm getting very firm and very specific commitment on what strategies are going to be used to increase the referrals. Next, what I do is I'm going to create accountability. So I'm going to take each of these and I'm going to assign an owner and a date. So I'm not only going to track the goal, I'm actually going to track the controllable activities and tasks that make up that goal. Because again, I'm not always going to achieve my goals. There's not a perfect correlation between doing a particular task and achieving a result. But I know on average and over time, I'm going to be able to do that. But I'm only going to be able to do it if I actually do the tasks. So I want to create accountability around that. Next, I want to generate a report. I want to get everyone in the practice on the same page as to what we're going to accomplish. Now before, our consultants had a whole hodgepodge of Word documents and Excel spreadsheets, and there was this document management library, and they'd cut and they'd paste and they'd do all this stuff, and usually it took like 3 or 4 hours, and the consistency of that deliverable and the quality of that deliverable was a little bit shaky. In this case, what we've done is we've systematized that. So we've taken what was maybe a 3 or 4 hour process and we've taken it down to 15 seconds. And we're always using the same verbiage, the same drawing from that knowledge base, from a compliance, from a consistency standpoint. We're sure that when those recommendations are going out to that advisor, they're consistent and high quality. Huge efficiency gain there. So this is an opportunity where we know we can really increase our expectations of our coaches, whether that's branch manager, whether it's a practice management consultant, and know that they can get a lot more done in less time. All right, great. So we've got this great plan. Again, analogy to financial planning really holds true. The plan is only as good as the effective execution. So now we're going to talk about execution. So we've got our roadmap. We want to actually talk about goal progress. So right now we're 0% on the goal and no progress on the recommendation. So let's fast forward a month. We call up the advisor, Mr. Advisor. You said that Susie was going to alter your agenda and you were going to track for each meeting whether referrals was an agenda item, and you discussed how you were going to frame that on the agenda. How many times in terms of the last 30 client meetings we had did that appear as an agenda item? So we're going to track that, and we're going to track whether it's done. So in this case, Susie completed it, and 100% of the time that agenda item occurred in each client meeting. Joe, on the other hand, has not. The other thing we said we would do is an appreciation event or an educational event. In this case, again, we will refine that task. We were going to do an educational event. We were going to ask our clients to bring a friend as part of that process, so we would both get the educational event and referral relationship. Joe's about 20% of the way there. We need to talk about is he stuck? What does he need help with? Maybe we can get our marketing group to help him select a educational topic. Maybe we've pre-built some invitations. Maybe there's some things that we could do to leverage the resources that our firm has that advisor maybe knows about but just doesn't put 2 and 2 together. Again, we assume a lot as firms that advisors will figure this stuff out because it's clear on the intranet. You just go to the website and it shows all the stuff. But in reality, we know that doesn't always happen. Okay, so next, tracking. So we actually are going to be able to take the metric in terms of referrals. So we put a plan together of 50, and we can map on a quarter-by-quarter basis how have we done against plan, and how has that yielded specific clients. And the beauty of this is we can compare against plan, we can compare against benchmark, we can really have a thoughtful discussion as to what do we want this activity to yield. Is it time? Is it revenue? Is it deeper client relationships? Is it enhanced client satisfaction? There's all sorts of different metrics. Let's talk about what are we going to dial. Let's not just roll it all up to this sort of very high level revenue growth number, which is really what we started with, and that was the only one that we had consistently across all of our firms. The next thing we want to do, just like we want to help our clients achieve their financial goals, we want to help our advisors. So we've created the heads up display, and this is a very, very powerful tool. So benchmarking is great, but the analogy I would use is that's looking out the rear view mirror. You're saying, how did I do in the past? What I want is the windshield view. What do I need to do going forward? And how can I correlate my top goals to the specific tasks that I've committed to do to implement against those, to what's resulting in terms of metrics? And I want that on my desk every day. I want to run my weekly staff meetings based on that. I want total visibility in my practice as to what are our goals, what are the tasks we're committed to, and how's that impacting our results. And guess what? I can design staff comp around this. I can literally create and that's another issue we see advisors really struggle with. How do I pay staff? Right here. We'll give total transparency. You help move those dials, that's going to fund the bonus plan. Again, if you have I'm assuming larger practices, it's equally applicable to an individual advisor. So I've got my heads up display. The next thing I'm going to show you is at the manager level. So now I've got 2,000 advisors and I know for every single advisor exactly what their top 3 goals are, the specific tasks they're working on, what metrics they're focused on. Now, how do I allocate my internal resources to map supply, all the wonderful programs, capabilities, resources we have, to demand? Before, it would be anecdotal. We'd sit in a conference room with some of our colleagues and say, well, we need a little more of the marketing stuff, or we need a little bit more in terms of practice efficiency. Now we can actually map it to specific goals their advisors have. We know there are 13 advisors that have this goal. It's not 12, it's not 14. And we can even look in those 13 advisors, what are the specific tasks and tactics that they're committed to, and how do we map perfectly our resources and capabilities with their needs and take all the guesswork out of it. So this is sort of more of a firm level view. Next is, if I'm coaching 100 advisors, how do I keep track of the upcoming tasks for all 100 advisors? I've got 10 minutes to do a check. I got an hour to do check-in calls. Which advisors do I call? I'm coaching 100 advisors. How the heck am I going to know? Well, I've got all of the tasks rolled up, so I can click on upcoming or overdue tasks, both at an individual advisor level, so they've got a real-time dashboard in terms of the things that they're committed, that are going to move their business forward, and the coach can see that across, you know, whatever advisors they're working with. And at the firm level, you can roll that up across regions or advisors. So there's kind of this, technically it's called a roles-based hierarchy, where the advisor sees theirs, the person that's working with the advisor sees all of the advisors they're working with, and then the person that's managing them can see all of the coaches. So we can, and we can also look at performance. Which people are moving the dial, both at the advisor level and the coach level. So we've got visibility into that. So again, we can really help these advisors and our coaches be successful and be much more scalable. Because it's amazing. We wouldn't expect our end advisors to go develop financial planning relationships with 100 clients and keep track of it on a bunch of yellow pads and which yellow pad, what are the upcoming tasks, and recalculate it. That's exactly what we expect our practice management people to do. We expect them to keep track of 100 advisors, their individual goals, the specific tasks they're committed to in working on their business, on a hodgepodge of yellow pads, Word documents, Excel spreadsheets. And think about that for a minute. And that's one of the things that's been really striking, is that the tools and capabilities and strategies are all there, but effectively executing upon them is the big challenge. So, now we get back to our story. As we thought about this, the executive presentation arrives. We confidently go in front of our committee. And it's not the same old, same old. We come to them and we present a scalable solution. It's not that we're just going to triple the head count and keep doing what we're doing. Interestingly, as we're walking out the meeting, the CEO comes up to us and talks about how the board has been putting quite a bit of pressure on him relative to organic growth rates. You know, we've knocked the ball out of the park on recruiting. Our recruiting numbers have been very, very good, but same-store sales are not equally good. And recruiting, you can only do so much of it. It's a much more sustainable business model to be able to grow the practices that we have. And we can also understand that, you know what, we can't invest equally in every advisory practice. If we've got an advisor that really, truly just wants to golf more, you know, if I could just maintain my income exactly the way it is and move from 60 hours to 20 hours, I have zero interest in growth. Well, you know, from a firm level perspective, that's not a bad, there's nothing wrong with that goal, but we kind of need to be strategic. You know, if our goal as a firm is to grow, we may choose to allocate fewer resources to that particular advisor than to another advisor that really is absolutely 100% committed to 20% top line revenue growth. And we can say, you know, we can be very realistic as we're projecting and we're forecasting the impact of our results in terms of how we would approach that. So let's fast forward a year down the line. Let's imagine we're now in 2011. What does that before and after look like in terms of our problem? Remember, we went through the 9 things that weren't working for us today? Now we're going to kind of take a look at what's happened. So the challenge before was providing enough coaches with the experience to coach our advisors. Afterward, we've kept our headcount the same. We've tripled the productivity of our coaches. So now we've each coach, practice management consultant, is working with 3 times the number of advisors. Before, we expected our junior coaches to instantly have the wisdom and understand all of the strategies and tactics that our most experienced advisors had by magic. Now, what we've done is we've put the wisdom at their fingertips. They don't have to know that. We've institutionalized that knowledge. Before, coordinating the consistency of advice. We didn't know what was going out to the advisors in terms of reporting and that sort of thing. Now, every advisor, every time, receives the collective best thinking of our whole firm, not based on that one coach that they were working with. Before, identifying critical indicators. We had some overall metrics, a la revenue growth, but they weren't necessarily relevant to some advisors. Some advisors had no interest in growing. Now we actually have indicators, in terms of after, that are mapped specifically to those goals. So maybe we've been really successful in terms of increasing client profitability or productivity. Maybe hasn't, it's just created time, and we know that advisor doesn't want to use that time to grow. Very insightful. We can understand as we plan our overall budgets and forecasts what that's going to look like. Before, managing coaching time with smaller practices was really a challenge. After, we've got the efficiency where the economics of coaching the smaller practices now make sense. We can do it remotely, we can keep the tasks, the systems, and so forth, have made us much, much more efficient. Remember, before, we had all this great end client feedback, but we had no idea if it was being executed upon. We didn't know if that advisor was taking the advice that they've learned and the money we spent in terms of surveying those clients. Now we've got exact mapping. We can actually show which strategies were selected, of those strategies which tasks were created, of those what results materialized. So we can draw total, direct causality between what our clients are telling us they want and what the advisor is doing about that. Before, we expected advisors to sort of take our recommendations and figure out how they were going to execute them. Now, we've broken them into bite-sized chunks that can be tracked. We know the individual tasks that need to be done, and we're tracking them. Before, we focused on broad goals and just had concepts and went out and marketed. Grow your business. Now, we made sure when we were doing that, they were directly correlated to the specific goals of that advisor. And we actually knew what they were. We knew how many advisors were focused on growth, how many advisors were focused more on succession planning, how many advisors just wanted to create more time to be with their family or golf. Before, we really had the random approach or anecdotal approach to matching our internal spend on all these resources and programs to advisor demand. Now, we've actually mapped it exactly. We know there are 13, not 12, not 14 advisors that specifically want this capability. So as we're scaling up or scaling down, we can be much more precise. So with that, I'd like to end just saying, think about what you could do for these advisors that need your help and your businesses if you could truly roll out a scalable practice management capability. And with that, I'll open it up to questions. Thank you.